Julie Bindel, the feminist writer, is the latest person alongside Ian Austin, Lord Austin, the former MP, now Lord Anti-Semitism campaigner, and Alison Pearson as well, who've been visited by police. Matthew, your thoughts on this?
I think it's an issue. I don't know what Alison Pearson has tweeted, and nobody seems to know.
Neither does she.
No,
it's the thing, they haven't told her which one it relates to.
No, and I think that's something the police do sometimes when they investigate any sort of crime. They may not tell you what exactly they know.
How can you defend yourself?
No, I agree. I think the problem is maybe the law is a little bit too vague, because for something to be grossly offensive, you could find something offensive and I could find it funny. And I think there is a difference between freedom of speech and you know, something being offensive compared to something...
Well, nobody should have the right not to be offended. And actually, if you look at the detail of what a non-crime hate incident is, if it's perceived to be something hateful. I mean, I could say you're a lanky beardy git. You could smile at it as you're just doing. You're not. Well, you're a bit lanky. You do have a beard. You're not a git, though. It must be said. You're lovely. But I mean, you laughed at that. James Dowling laughed at that.
No, I'm grossly offended.
Oh, you're grossly offended. You're going to report me, are you? I mean, we're joking about it, but it is kind of a very, very serious issue for many people.
No, and I think there is a difference between offending somebody and incitement. I think if you are somebody who you could maybe assume you know what you're doing, somebody like a Tommy Robinson whose whole MO is to whip up hate against other people, for instance, I don't think that's what people are always necessarily doing, whether it be discussing things, whether it be trans issues or anything else, ethnicity or whatever. I think there's a difference, and we don't seem to know. There's a big grey area where the law is, and I think that's where even the police seem to be going, yeah, no, we don't really know why we're here either, and that therefore...
Well, we've had Mark, the police officer, on already. James Dowling, what's your perspective on this?
I completely agree. I mean, I do think there's a... it's difficult to talk about the individual cases.
We don't know what they are. We don't know what these people are accused of.
But they do feel... It does feel like they are illustrating a wider question that certainly kind of sits within the public at large, and presumably within the police, which is, what are the boundaries?
Yeah.
And, you know, we talk about grossly offensive. I think it is right that some things should be regarded as grossly offensive and should be, you know, subject to investigation. But the question is, what are they? I mean, it would be really interesting to understand what... I mean, that example of the individual tweeting a swastika at Jewish people, I mean, that feels pretty...
That to me is open and shut.
That's anti-Semitic.
Open and shut anti-Semitism. And we have this clip as well. I just want to play this one more time about this clip that we have. This is at Swiss Cottage in North London. In the last few days, this is a woman who was saying that Zionists should be put down, and the police stand idly by and do absolutely nothing. Let's just play this clip again.
Now, these people are terminally deranged. And the sickness is Zionism. And it's incurable. So they just need to be put down, perhaps.
I mean, this is a woman saying that people are terminally deranged, the sickness is Zionism, they need to be put down. And you can see in that clip, you can see police officers standing there doing absolutely nothing. We know this Cambridgeshire Constabulary, in the separate case, have concluded that the image that James was just talking about there, the image of a Star of David intertwined with a Nazi swastika sent to a Jewish students' organisation. I mean, if you were to create in a lab something that is a hateful thing, that would be it.
Yes. So,
and the police are doing nothing about it yet. Tweets that I don't know what they're about. The people involved don't know what they're about. The police have recorded these non-crime hate incidents.
Yeah, and I think I think before we get into kind of what the law says, I think it would be... I would be very interested to understand what training the police are getting on this, because, I mean, they clearly are in often quite an invidious situation, and you've got individuals who could be quite junior, having to take quite difficult decisions. I mean, I would say some of the ones we've discussed aren't that difficult, but nevertheless, it would be interesting to understand what training they've been given. What are the examples of grossly offensive versus calling someone a lanky beardy git?
Yes, and also the fact that, I mean, there are things that are factual. Ian Austin, the Lord Austin, for example, said that tweeted out and said Hamas are Islamists. I mean, I don't think even Hamas terrorists would actually. I mean, it is factual that they are Islamists. He was had a knock on the door from the police because of that. I mean, it's crazy, Matthew. There just doesn't seem to be any form of rhyme or reason to it.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't aware of that, and that seems a bit nonsensical.
Yeah, he wrote an article for the Telegraph about it. Yeah, we tried to talk to him. Unfortunately, he's got family commitments today. Can't speak to us. But I mean, it's just nonsense.
Well, I think as well, not to sort of try and trivialise it compared to things like swastikas being sent and people saying that certain people should be sent down because of their ethnicity or religion. I think the problem with the law is it was set when it was set, and what I mean by that is if we look at things, for instance, within society, look at Little Britain 20 years ago, we all laughed at Little Britain, and now we look at it now and go, oh yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah, very cringe.
And I think because society changes its mind on what is offensive and what isn't, or what could be seen as maybe grossly offensive and what isn't, I think the language is so vague that it creates a bit of a vacuum of a grey area that people can decide for themselves what maybe is or isn't offensive.
Well, the problem is if you look at the definition of what a non-crime hate incident is, it's perceived by the person who's on the receiving end or any other person. Any person. Well, that's where someone watching this could report. Literally, I'm not exaggerating here. I'm not being, tabloidy. I'm not exaggerating. I mean, literally, me calling you a lanky beardy git, someone could report me for a non-crime hate incident.
It would be very sweet for someone to be offended on my behalf, but I can handle.
But you're not offended.
Yes, quite. Yes. And it therefore worries me ever so slightly if we're to take what Julie Bindel says here, that it was reported by a man in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And I think, well, I don't see the direct correlation in if you thought she was inciting hatred in whatever she was saying, how that would impact you. I always try and be fair, and I think if I was trans, and this is a tweet about someone that was trans, maybe I at the moment would feel constantly under attack. I feel like we're in the newspapers a lot, we're the new scapegoat, there's a lot of talk in America, and maybe this is going to impact my life. I'm not sure. I think that is a bit of a reach from someone in the Netherlands when she's, tweeting about maybe same-sex toilets or something. I don't know.
And also, she's entitled to her opinion because we have free speech.
No, and I'm totally a believer in free speech, and I think you have to be able to challenge those head-on that say things. And
by all means, challenge it. Send a tweet back saying, "I disagree with you." Be respectful about it. A lot of people, send me tweets and say they disagree with me. The respectful ones are very welcome. The non-respectful ones are less welcome. James, how does the government get a grip on this?
And as I say, I think partly, underpinning this, it feels like there's probably a resourcing issue with the police. Now, whether that's they don't have enough people to do the job, I think they probably don't in general terms, but also about the kind of the training they're getting, the understanding that individual police officers have about what the boundaries are. They should probably think, I think Matthew makes a very good point. I mean, it's probably worth looking at whether the law reflects society as is now. And the technological,
the law never keeps up with the technological innovations.
And you need to, but that doesn't mean you should stop trying to maintain it.
Yes.
It just means that we need to maintain it.
Yeah.
But my first instinct would not be, as some media outlets are suggesting, that we scrap the Human Rights Act. It would be, let's have a look at whether the law works for the modern age. And in practice, how is this working? And is there a common understanding across the police, who have a very difficult job about about what constitutes grossly offensive?
Well, we actually had a texter, and I want to ask people as well about what they think about this. 0344499100. We had a really good texter yesterday who knows about police promotion. Said if you want to do your sergeant's exams, if you're a constable, you've got to show that you have dealt with a hate crime incident or some report of that. So let us know what you think. Are the police too focused on hate crimes? Are they not focused enough? Maybe they're focused in the wrong direction. Anti-Semitism, straightforward things. I mean, I'm just in disbelief at Cambridgeshire Constabulary concluding the image of an image of a Star of David intertwined with a Nazi swastika. Apparently, it's not grossly offensive, yet calling Hamas Islamists, which they factually are, has a knock on the door from another police force. This is just a crazy, crazy thing. I should, of course, give Cambridgeshire Police right of reply here, but they don't seem to have commented to the Telegraph who've reported this. If they do, we'll let you know. Graham is in Berkshire. Graham, you're very welcome to the programme. James Dowling and Matthew Torbitt are still with me. In fact, they'll be with me until 11 o'clock, but so you're on with them as well. What are your thoughts on this?
It's extremely worrying that we can police a tweet which is possibly upsetting to somebody, but we can't police death threats to politicians, to teachers, to a child who scuffed a Quran. Now, I can't see why people aren't making threats to people aren't being dealt with as a preference. Also, Dawn Butler incited anger against the police with her tweet in the car. Kemi Badenoch had to shrug off Dawn Butler's comments.
What would you say about, let's take the second one of those. Dawn Butler said that Kemi Badenoch was the black face of white supremacy. Do you think she should have been investigated for a hate crime as a result of that, or should we just shrug it off and say that was bad taste, that was a stupid thing to do, you shouldn't have done it, it's distasteful? You know, should the police get involved with that sort of thing, for example, Graham?
Right, well, my argument is if you're doing it on one person, you do it on all.
And that's the point, Graham, isn't it? Because the law, sorry, I'll let you talk in a second, but you're right in that the law has to apply equally to everybody, and that's the problem here, isn't it?
It is, and my belief is I was born with cerebral palsy. I got that bejesus taken out of me all my life, yeah? I don't give a damn, you know? Say what they like. I know who I am, what I am.
Yeah.
And I don't need some middle-class idiot to be offended for me.
On your behalf.
We are a nation now which is unable to debate. I've got to the stage where if I'm writing a song, I have to be exceptionally careful about how I write it, what I say. You're almost at a stage where if you write a song that said, the elderly are being used as collateral damage with the winter fuel limit.
Alliance,
Rachel Reeves, the Grim Reaper. Then are you then inciting something?
Well, I don't think either of those things would be seen as incitement. I think they would be seen as comments which people would perhaps disagree with. Graham, hold your thoughts for a second. I promise you I'll come back to you in a second, but I just want to bring in James and Matthew, and we'll get Graham's thoughts on what you guys have to say. What do you make of what Graham is saying there, Matthew?
I think the Dawn Butler incident, I might be wrong. I don't think she said it. She reshared a post.
That's right, yes,
I would
you're right.
say
Apologies,
the very best case scenario, it's carelessness, and I always think MPs should not do Twitter and leave it to a comms professional, but that's by the bag.
But she's being held responsible for saying that Kemi Badenoch is the black face of white supremacy, and that is something that should never have been sent out.
No, that's racist. You know, that's simple as it is. And I think certain black people with certain views have had to put up with this sort of stuff for years. I think there's other ways of disagreeing with people rather than lowering the tone like that. And
she's done it before with Kwasi Kwarteng as well.
Yes, no, of course. I think what I would say, not directly specific to this Cambridgeshire Police incident, but maybe in a similar way. The clip where the woman was screaming and sort of basically saying, you know, Zionists should be struck out or whatever, put down. Yeah. And I thought about what James said about the policing. We used to have a lot of community policing, and we've had 10,000 community police officers cut since 2010. I think it's over that now. And I wonder, it's very easy to hit the police, and I do actually quite a lot.
In that incident, the police were literally standing beside the woman.
I agree, and I wonder whether because of shortages and being young, potentially, like James said, I wonder if they even knew what a Zionist was. Yeah. Compared to if you were a community police officer that does that beat, that is your area, you know people there, you know there's potential tension.
But also, surely, if you say people should be put down and Zionists should be put down, I mean, that's pretty obvious, that's pretty straightforward, is it not, James?
It is, but I think Matthew has a reasonable point, which is if you don't know what a Zionist is, or you know, police. If you're a young police officer, you're also a person who lives your life, and you're exposed to the same.
But if you're a police officer and you're being sent out to police a protest about, for example, Israel or the war in Gaza or whatever, surely you should have the absolute basics.
I completely agree. Agree. But I think this is the issue.
This is the issue here.
I suppose you have to also very quickly decipher the potential threat. Are the police looking at this woman going, oh, it might all kick off here in a minute, or are they going, she's a nutter?
Well,
you know.
I mean, she is, but also...
No, I agree.
But also, they should arrest her because she's inciting violence.
No, I think...
And if they haven't done it so far, they should. Graham is still with us, Graham in Berkshire there. What do you think of what you've just heard there from James and Matthew, Graham?
Firstly, people have been imprisoned for retweeting. We have also had the situation where people have not been arrested immediately for suggesting that people should have their throats cut. One person was released for and not even given a record for saying that women who don't agree with trans should be punched. These are things that are there, and I do find, and yours is refreshing, having two sides of the argument that aren't shouting over each other, that it's more a problem for socialists having go at people they consider to be right-wing. I believe that Keir Starmer incited a lot of hatred by describing a whole group of people as being right-wing when they weren't. And I think politicians have a duty to be more careful with what they say. It's a bit like I've had a go at the BBC over something a lot less than this concerning type 1, type 2 diabetes. My son was type 1, and because the BBC had said it was all to do with people being overweight and fat, he took a hell of a bad beating. It's not physical beating, verbal beating at school for being a type 1.
Yeah, you've got to be careful with language, don't you, Graham? You've got to be careful. Sorry? You've got to be careful with language. You've got to be truthful with it as well. And if you're telling the truth, there should be no issue. And if you're expressing an opinion, there should be no issue. Graham, thank you for that. I appreciate that. It's Graham in Berkshire there. Simon in Devon has sent me a WhatsApp message. He says, we must stop the tit-for-tat whataboutery with regards to hate speech or free speech. Will eat itself alive. As for non-hate crime incidents, the answer is in the name. If it is not a hate crime, so therefore this needs to be binned. America are literally laughing at us right now. Great programme, says Simon in Devon. Well, we're going to talk more about America, what Trump is saying, what lessons he could possibly take from here in the UK, what relationship we're going to have. In fact, Matthew's just back from America. He can give us his perspective, although I think he's a bit sad Kamala Harris didn't win. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, thank you to everyone who's been in touch. You can send me a voice note on 0344 499 1000 via WhatsApp, same way you send a voice note to anybody else. First one of the day is from Nick, and he wants to reflect on the Chris Philp interview in regard to hate crime. We're asking the question today about what you think about what the government, what the police are doing about hate crime. This is Nick's opinion.
Morning, Peter. I love your show. I think you truly are the voice of reason and decent debate. It makes my blood boil listening to people like Chris Philps, under whose government all the foundations for this two-tier policing nonsense was started. And it now really makes me angry to hear him bleating on about something, the root cause of which can be planted firmly at the Tories' door.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will feel the same way. Nick, I did slightly make that point to Chris Philp, but yeah, and thanks for your kind comments. I mean, very, very sensible common sense spoken there by Nick, and thank you for that. Dawn in Chelmsford says, good morning, Peter. Have you noticed the police only appear to investigate soft targets? They're happy to go after certain individuals, but seem not to notice anti-Semitic comments and placards. Yes, indeed, and we've reflected that, of course, this morning as well. Chris in Ottershaw says, Chris Philp talks a good game, a tough game on migration, but we've heard it all before, and I expect if the Tories were to unfortunately be elected again, they would be as useless as this government, and past Tory governments. Reform is the party for me. Jan in Newcastle says, regarding non-crime hate incidents, so all these people having a police visit are all right-leaning, yet the likes of Dawn Butler, who has said a few things quite nasty online, hasn't. Come on, we can all see what's happening here, says Jan. Kelvin in Macclesfield says, Starmer, the people starver, pension freezer, free speech stopper, needs to stop the boats and put out and sort this out. You come here at your own risk. You will not be picked out of our waters anymore. If you get here, you will not get freebies, put in hotels, no nothing, and you will each get fined £5,000 for each of these offences. Unsafe boats, overloading the boats, putting lives at risk, trying to get into our country illegally. We are all sick of Labour. This party is too weak to deal with these. God help us if we end up in a war. They would welcome the enemy too. And and offer them posh hotels and freebies. Get Labour out, says Kelvin in Macclesfield. Well, I don't think that's going to happen for at least 4.5 years, although there are, of course, the local elections coming up when people will have their say, certainly in many English authorities. Let's talk a little bit about asylum, actually. Matthew Torbitt and James Dowling are still with me, because record numbers of asylum seekers have been allowed to stay in Britain after claiming they're gay. The figures almost trebled this year, from 762 in 2022 to 2,133 people who could demonstrate that returning to the homeland would be inhumane because of their sexuality. James Dowling, do you believe them?
Well, on the face of it, the numbers do suggest there's some exploitation of the system. But I have to say, this is something where I would be cautious of saying again that the reason for that is the ECHR and we should scrap it. If people are falsely claiming, then we should not be doing so. Then we should the system should be working to screen them appropriately. I think the wider point is also that people should be free to continue to claim asylum because of their sexuality, because quite clearly some people do flee fearing persecution.
I'm sure some of them are telling the truth, but are all 2,133 of them telling the truth? And are the protocols and the robust nature?
I'm sure that some of them are not. I mean, it does look like that on the face of it. But
Matthew, what do you think about this?
It's hard to say. I think I helped a friend a few years ago. He came to this country legally and did it through the proper processes. Isn't gay, but I saw the hoops you have to jump through to prove that he has an active family life with his only child, pictures that you have to show going right the way back, all sorts of different evidence and documentation. And when I was working in Parliament during COVID, it appeared there was a backlog because of that on dealing with certain cases. And I just look at some of the countries here where people are coming from ones like Afghanistan. It wouldn't be a surprise to me that people now all of a sudden feel like they can't live in Afghanistan because of their sexuality, whereas they may have felt a little bit easier before the Taliban were in. I would always err on the side of caution. I think it's right that people should claim, and I think we have to wait and see. I think there will always be people that will wish to gain.
But we can't wait and see because we were letting these people in, and they may be making it up.
And they might be, and it comes down to the judgment of people working at the Home Office and the case officers. I do worry about Chris Philp slightly muddying the waters by trying to... We have issues, clearly, where people are claiming to be converting to different religions. I think that's harder to disprove because you can just say
there was I mentioned it a little bit earlier on actually with David Bill. I think there was a case that we spoke about a couple of months ago on this programme actually about a guy who said he had converted to Christianity, studied the Bible every day for 3 years, he said, and he was asked in court, basic knowledge, which testament refers to Jesus the most, and he said the Old Testament, and obviously the New Testament is all about Jesus, and basically anybody who anybody been to Sunday school for like a week would know that.
That feels like the system not working. Though.
Sorry. Well, that's a fair point. I mean, if you're an asylum seeker, you're going to exploit the system.
Is it working? The judge has caught him out. That's the system.
Why does it get to a court? I mean, that's a basic point.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a fair point.
Both these,
and are the Home Office actually turning up for those things as well?
All of this, I think, feels like before you move to a radical redrawing of the legal basis for some of these, which is what some people will be arguing, and notably the Daily Mail references the ECHR very early on. The system needs to be resourced appropriately and needs to be run appropriately.
I can't help but thinking, James, that you are not advocating withdrawal of the ECHR.
I'm really not, and I find it curious that all these things in the Mail and the Telegraph are linked back to it one way or another, when I think you have a more basic, prosaic issue, which is the Home Office, because we've talked about two Home Office things, is simply not resourced appropriately, and indeed in the most recent spending review was cut.
We've got 32,000 civil servants. There's a lot of them.
They took a 7% cut in their budget.
The issue with the ECHR, sorry to cut across, the reason why I think this might not sell that well with the public is we were sold this silver bullet during Brexit, and if I'd have voted Brexit, I was told that if we would leave, and I don't want to start rehashing all that.
Money, borders, and I think a lot of people think we haven't taken back control of our borders.
No, it looks like it's more out of control than it ever has been. Yeah. So the idea that you go, oh, well, actually, we found this other thing now that really will solve the issue.
If we just leave this.
I think politicians have ruined their own reputation with people.
We should leave Eurovision.
If they had one, leave Eurovision, and that's something I can go with. Let's talk about an issue which is actually tearing apart the Labour Party at the moment. This is about assisted dying. It reports that a lot of MPs on both sides, but particularly on the Labour side, don't actually know what to do. They're asking their whips, the people who deal with discipline in the parties, to actually give them some guidance on this. Although it's a free vote, it's assisted dying. Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, has said that he's against it. Other people, and he's been slapped down apparently by Keir Starmer for doing so because he's in the Cabinet and should keep his counsel. He said that the Health Department should look into the implications of it and how it would all work. I think that's quite sensible. Then we have other people being against it, people like Liz Kendall, the Work and Pension Secretary. Louise Hay is the Transport Secretary. She was on Sky News this morning, and this is what she said about assisted dying.
I'm still considering. It's a matter of public record that I voted in favour last time, and that is where I am leaning. I am really conscious that there are concerns, particularly from disabled advocacy groups, around and concerns around palliative care. So I am considering that. I think this is a really important moment for the country as a whole to reflect.
That's a politician sort of not really saying anything. Matthew, what do you think yourself, and also what's your view of the row that's going on within the Labour Party about this?
I don't know what I think myself. I think I can see both sides of the argument, and the only thing that concerns me is if we were to pass something like this, you cannot put the genie back in the bottle, and I think it would fundamentally change our society, and I don't know if it would be for a good reason. However, if I was in the position that certain people are, that wish they had the right to die as such, maybe I would want that. So it's tricky, and I understand why politicians are wrangling. I don't know if he's tearing the party apart. I think Wes Streeting's maybe above his own stations, if that's sort of tearing the party apart. I have a little bit of sympathy with him, because as much as, you know, Simon Case has written to all the ministers and said, look, you shouldn't be getting involved. Yeah, you shouldn't be getting involved in the public debate because obviously you don't wish to sway people and it's knock people's noses out of joint. He's got to be the person that's going to have to implement it.
Yeah, he is the Health Secretary.
He's obviously going to have more of a...
But he's also a practising Christian. He's also someone who says that he doesn't believe it'll be a good thing for the country. What do you think, James Dowling?
I mean, this is going to annoy you because I'm going to agree with Matt again. We've got to kind of... it would be much more fun to say that he takes a different view and therefore he's bad.
Can we agree he's a lanky, bearded git?
And he suffers moral turpitude on that basis. But Louise Hay and I are hardly ideological bedfellows. But this is, I have to say, is one of these issues which makes me pleased I'm not an MP, because I genuinely don't know how I would vote on this either. I have a lot of sympathy for people faced with the prospect of dying in pain without the prospect of relief, and I can absolutely see that faced with that fate, I would want that way out. And it feels like, I think where Matthew and I differ probably is I would probably be more inclined to think that this is something we should proactively try and examine. Yeah. But to be honest, without, and I haven't gone into the detail of what the bill provides, without looking at that, I would be quite cautious about the...
Well, we should certainly consider it very, very carefully, no matter what our opinion on this is. And a few views on assisted dying or assisted suicide, as some people call it. Some people say you shouldn't use that definition. Others say there are two different things. Whatever you think, let us know. 0344 499 1000. We're also talking about the police today and whether they are overreaching or indeed underreaching on hate crime. Also, Zelensky's been talking as well, Vladimir Zelensky. He's saying the war may end sooner under Donald Trump. Matthew Torbitt's just back from America. I want to get his perspective on this and the election in general. The ramifications, of course, still being felt and cabinet people being brought out. Let's see what Zelensky has been saying about this.
I believe that the war will end, and it will not end in the abstract, but there's no exact date. However, the war will end faster with the policy of this team that will now lead the White House. This is their approach, their promise to their society, and it is also very important to them.
So that's Zelensky there talking about that. I wonder with the... let's talk about Trump, though, because him being president-elect now, things have changed and foreign policy has changed, I think, even within the last little while. Matthew, you were in America for the election. The person you backed didn't win. But what do you make of what Trump has done so far and what the implications for us in the UK and indeed for Ukraine and other aspects of foreign policy might be?
I worry about some of his appointments. I think on foreign policy, I think Zelensky's basically repeating what has been said. Trump said the war will end. And I think, you know, it's very obvious to say it will end at some point. We don't know when. I think where it may become really interesting is I saw Boris Johnson gave an interview to a sort of different outlet, And he said he believed, and this is someone that's obviously quite close to Zelensky and has a vested interest in, you know, was really passionate about Ukraine defeating Russia. He said he believed there could be a deal that could be done in that Ukraine could give away some land in return for something like NATO membership. Now, I think that's probably not on the table because it goes totally against Putin's, you know, MO. But it's interesting that a deal seems to be something that's potentially on the table.
Well, it has to. It has to end in some way, and I think we should be asking a lot sooner. You know, how does this all end? Because it has to. And you know, wars end with either surrender, and even within surrender, there's some sort of negotiation.
Yeah.
Thank you for your thoughts on that. I want to ask James Dowling in the last couple of minutes about Rachel Reeves' CV. I know this is something you're very keen to tell us about because we were talking about this a little bit yesterday. And the fact that Rachel Reeves, she was an economist for the Bank of England. However, she's updated her LinkedIn social media profile about her role at the Bank of Scotland previously to retail banking. Tell us your thoughts on this, James.
I just think it's quite funny, to be honest. I mean, I have not, that I'm aware of, fabricated or elaborated bits of my CV.
Or so you would have us believe, James.
Well, yes, there's going to be lots of people checking now, but it is one of these things which I think is very easy to do when you are younger and could easily catch up with you. And my suspicion is that this is what's happened here, but it is very unfortunate if you are thinking that you want a political career. That this kind
and
of
also,
thing
why not change it before now? Why not just sort of do it, you know, before you're caught out?
And so what if you worked for the Bank of Scotland? I mean, that seems a perfectly legitimate thing to do if you're an economist, whether you were doing an economist's job or not. And you are now Chancellor many years later. I mean, it's like
have
weird.
You enhanced your
and
CV,
I find it funny.
Matthew?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I did it to get into Parliament.
Did you? Oh dear.
I was very honest with my boss on the last day, and I said, you do know when I came into that interview, I had no experience in communications, but I felt I knew I could do the job and you wouldn't hire me if I didn't. So maybe it's an issue on the left.
It's an issue on the left. There you have, that's Matthew Torbitt saying that enhancing your CV is an issue on the left. I think we'll perhaps get a few comments on that as well.
As is well known, all Tories, particularly Tory leaders, are scrupulously honest.
Says the president of the Boris Johnson fan club, James Dowling, there, also the president of the removal of the ECHR fan club, which is sort of the same thing. Thank you both very much indeed, says James incredulously looking at me. James Dowling there, former Conservative Special Advisor. Matthew Torbitt, he used to work for Labour and he is a political commentator, so thank you to both of them.